Our procedure at our city council meeting is to start each of our meetings with an invocation and with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will join us and if you will stand, we will follow our procedure. If you'll bow, Lord God, we thank you for this opportunity and thank you for this blessing of being present and being in this body. We thank you for the great blessing of being citizens in this great country and the freedoms that we enjoy. Thank you for the individuals who have offered themselves and are offering themselves to public service. Thank you for all public servants, and thank you for the ability to serve. Forgive us of our sins and give us directions. Bless the families of these individuals, as we said before. Bless them as they support their loved ones, and bless us to make the wisest decision that we possibly can. And after this election is over, and the elections during this cycle, let us have peace, and let us be about the business of making government the best that we can. Forgive us of our sins, and God, please bless America. Join me as we pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the candidates for the position of city judge for the city of Bastrop and the wards that are involved. Tonight, we will have a forum in which questions will be asked. This is not a debate, but you've had an opportunity to submit questions, and we will allow individuals to answer these questions. Tonight, the candidates for the position are Ross Downs. Give him a round of applause. And Philip Lester. The format tonight is we're going to give each of the individuals an opportunity to make an opening statement. We have a very competent timer. Ms. Jessica is over with the electronic clock that has digital readout, and the candidates see the clock. It's located over to my right. And during the opening statements, they will be allowed each to have a 5-minute period of time in which they can make any general statement that they wish to. At the end of the forum, we will allow each of them to have a 2-minute period of time to make a closing statement. When we ask the questions, we will allow each candidate to have 3 minutes I got to remember that, up to, because they don't have to take all the time, right? They have up to 3 minutes to make their response to the questions, as it will also be applicable to their opening statements and or closing statements. So we will start, and we have we're going to go alphabetically with this first round and start with Mr. Downs and give him an opportunity to make his opening statement.
All right. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. My name's Ross Downs, and I'm number 68 on the ballot. I'd like to just briefly introduce my wife, Gina, and my youngest son are here, as well as my mom, dad, and mother-in-law. I've been a resident here now for 15 years, going back to 1993, and take a lot of pride in Bastrop. People in Monroe often kid me about the pride that I take in Bastrop when I see them out and about. The first thing I'd like to do before I state my platform and why I'm running is to thank Mr. Lester for holding himself out for public service, to wish him well. And I think that's important because our campaign is not about Ross Downs versus Philip Lester. Our campaign for judge in this race is about doing the very, very best we can to make Bastrop and Morehouse the best that it can be. I firmly believe that in a small town such as Bastrop, we've got to have small town values, and we've got to address the crime and drug problem. I've had an opportunity now, starting back in April of this year, that's 5 months ago, to start walking neighborhoods and talking to people. And I've done it consistently for the last 5.5 months or so, 5-6 days a week. And I thought that that was important because I wanted to really get an understanding of what the people thought, what our problems were, what our weaknesses were, and what our strengths were. And what I found was, from talking to people, is that crime is the #1 issue. crime is what has everyone concerned about. It doesn't matter if you live in Bastrop, if you live on Yarborough Road, off a carbon plant, off of Old Bonita Road. Crime is what everyone has talked about, and drugs, the prevalence of drugs throughout our community. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about what I plan to do about it as your city judge. I'm absolutely serious in fighting crime, and let me share with you why it's so important. Is when Gina and I chose to come and live here 15 years ago, we knew we'd have a bunch of kids. I didn't know I'd have 5, but it ended up with 5 kids, and that's what we wanted, because we wanted small town, we wanted the peace, safety, and security of a small town. And we see right now that that's threatened by just reading the paper on a daily basis. When I grew up in New Orleans, crime, murder, and things of that sort occurred on a daily basis there. I can remember some of the stories and some of the things that shaped my childhood, where my parents' car was robbed, used in an armed robbery, and somebody was murdered in my parents' car. I can remember the story in my neighborhood, somebody tried to break into a house and somebody was shot and killed. And even in law school, the kicker for me and why I came here, where my wife was born and raised, was in law school, one of my best friend's wives was killed off of St. Charles Avenue. I came to Bastrop because I wanted small town values and a small, peaceful way of life where you sit on the porch, you have a good time, and take it easy. And what I've seen from talking to people is people are concerned about that. Our elderly now lock themselves up in their houses. When you knock on their doors, you see the camera with the wire sticking down, and you hear them unbolting 3 sets of locks. When I was off of Perry Street the other day, there's 12 pairs of tennis shoes hanging off a telephone wire. And for those that don't know what that means, is that's where you go to buy crack. That's the sign for it. That, to me, is unacceptable. That's why I'm running for judge, is to do something about it. I've talked to policemen and sheriff's department folks. The latest that I've heard is that we're 10 people short on the police force. We've got shifts of only 3 or 4 people. Now, the judge doesn't do anything about that. I don't hire and fire police, but it's my job as your judge to vigorously enforce the law and back them up. And because I'm an elected person, I feel it's my obligation to draw attention to that problem. We have got to fully staff and man the police department. We've got to address crime and drugs. We've got to educate our kids and deal with the truancy problem. And believe it or not, this city court can do those things. This court has the power to do that. That's why we're running for Bastrop City Judge. That's what our campaign is about, and that's what we intend to do if you vote number 68. Now, I'm about out of time, and in a few moments, I'll share some other thoughts with you throughout the evening and look forward to the questions that are asked. Thank you very much.
I should have said this. I would appreciate it if you'd hold your applause until at the end of the debate rather than between each question. Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. I, too, would like to thank everyone involved, and I appreciate the opportunity I have to come here tonight and let you know a little bit about me and what I desire. For most of you, if you don't know me, my name's Philip Lester. I was born and raised here in Bastrop. So I, too, have an understanding of this community because I've been here for 42 years. I've contributed to this community throughout my lifetime with most time, effort, and money, and I want to continue to do so as your city judge. We have an important election upcoming. As you're aware, most of you, generally when a city judge is elected, he's here for quite a long time, and that's evident by Judge Wilson's term as well as Judge Brandon's. So the task that we have in the upcoming week and the election this Saturday is an important one for all of us, and we need to take that seriously and as to who you put in office. And I hope tonight, through the comments by both Mr. Downs and myself, that will make that an easier choice for anybody who hadn't made up their mind. And hopefully after tonight and throughout the rest of the week that you can make that decision based upon what you see here. I'm married to April Cox. We have one child by the name of Caden. He's 3 years old. And we're very privileged to have that little boy. And we, too, want a better place to live for our family and for ourselves. I have the same memories of growing up here in Bastrop, and I know what the community needs, and I know what I can present to the community. I graduated from Bastrop High in 1984, And I went on to ULM at that point and graduated in 1988 with a degree in business management. And from there, I went to LSU Law School, where I graduated in 1991. And I returned here to practice law and have been for the last approximately 16 years. My practice is very broad, and everything that I do on a daily basis is what you see in city court. Everything that I touch is the same thing that happens here day in and day out. So I not only have the experience, but I'm qualified for this job. And most of all, it's a job that I desire. My parents, if those you don't know them, were Walter Lester and Bernie Sullivan, and my stepfather was the late John Sullivan. Coach Sullivan was an educator here in Morehouse Parish all his life. He was a Bastrop football coach for years and years. And before the Bradshaw era, he was the one that was responsible for the last playoff appearances. So as a little kid, I grew up at Bastrop High School in that stadium, watching when they were successful. And unfortunately, when I was in high school, I watched when they were unsuccessful. But all that's changed now. We have a much better program. We have some good coaches. We have good educators. We have a good school board and a great superintendent. And we have a unique opportunity in Morehouse Parish in the coming future in that we have a new sheriff, a new tax assessor. We're going to have a new police chief, several new offices that we can all work together, a new city marshal, and obviously a new judge. We need to be willing to work together to make all this come together. There's going to be some changes made in every department, and we need people that are willing to work hard and dedicate their time and efforts to do so. I'm willing to sacrifice my practice for this job. It'll be my first priority, and I've been willing to do that. I've desired this job not for the last few months, but for several years, and I hope that you'll give me the opportunity to prove that I deserve that. I've emphasized throughout my campaign several things, but one of the most being the fact that a court needs to be something that people can look at with the honesty and integrity that it deserves. And I try every day to uphold those values, and I'll do so and make that the rule of this court with myself and the personnel that are here. Some people desire to be doctors, some people desire to be engineers, others desire to be pharmacists, plumbers, carpenters. I've had a desire to be city judge for a number of years. It's an honorable position. It's an opportunity for me to make a positive influence on the general public, especially young adults, and that's my goal. I desire to help in a public service way, and you realize that when you go to law school, that's what it's about. You're not always, and I didn't realize it when I first got there, but you quickly learn that public service is the number one factor in being an attorney, and it's the number one factor in being a judge. It's a place to administer justice. It's not a place to be a cheerleader. It's a place to sit back and be unbiased, have a neutral court, and present the court to administer justice whenever the need calls for it, whether good or bad, whether it calls for tougher crimes and penalties for things that happen, or whether it calls for the administration of justice and letting people off when the cases are not proven and the facts don't present themselves for convictions. I promise to do my job, and most of all, that's what it's going to take. I'll earn the respect of the public and the police officers simply by doing that. And if you do your job, everything takes care of itself. I'll work with the city, I'll work with the mayor, the new marshal, city council, whatever it takes to make this a better place. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those opening statements. The questions that will follow will be, we're going to be asking you to answer those within the 3-minute time limit. And we're going to start this round with Mr. Lister. The general opinion is that the current city judge, Judge Brandon, has always operated with an open-door policy, an open-door approach. Will you continue the open-door approach that seems to exist in city court at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. I will do that. I intend to have an open door to the community for any suggestions that can be made to make this a better court. But in doing that, you have to be careful. It's important that if you're going to have an open door, that you also have an opportunity for the people who are litigating their cases, the attorneys, the prosecutors, the defense attorneys, to be a part of that as well. So I'm willing, obviously, to do whatever I can to help move cases through the court, to promote a cleaner, safer city. But you have to keep in mind the administration of justice in doing that. You can't have an appearance, which is most important, of being prejudiced or biased towards anyone. So in having an open door, it's very important that you keep everyone involved that you open your door and you listen. I've indicated to numerous people, the pastors throughout the parish, the people who are leaders for the young people, that I'm willing to have an open door to discuss certain cases and situations, to set up diversion programs when they're justified and deserved. Young people make mistakes, we all do, but the repeat offenders, they've been here before, and they need to learn that this is not an open door for them to come in and out on a daily basis. I want to work with the community, and I'm willing to do that, but I'm willing to do that on an unbiased and neutral position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Downs.
Yeah, I certainly believe in an open-door policy, and the way that that can be accomplished, even on cases that are being litigated, is if all the parties are present. So if it's a criminal case, you can have a chambers conference where the prosecutor as well as defense attorney, or if the litigant there, the criminal defendant's representing himself, you can discuss matters and discuss things in that form in order to address any appearance of impropriety. You know, one of the things that I've tried to do over the 15 years in Bastrop, and I think I've done well, is be involved in a lot of different things. And that's opened the door, if you will, to where I have a real good heartbeat and feel for the pulse of what's going on in the community. Whether it be business, with my past work with the Chamber of Commerce, I have ideas about what they want and don't want, what's important to them to help attract business to our town. With our ministers, oftentimes, you know, they're very concerned about seeing kids, particularly young adults or teenagers, not get some type of criminal record if at all possible. So I will have an open door policy. I will visit with folks, talk with folks. Another big thing that I think our court can do and is not being done at this time is community service as a component part of sentences. I'm the founding attorney of Morehouse Teen Court. Back in, I believe it was in the mid-'90s, around 95, 96, somewhere up in there, we started Teen Court. And Teen Court is a juvenile crime prevention problem, or court that addresses that problem of juvenile crime. And let me just share a little bit with you on that. What happens in that particular court is that teenagers, or the prosecuting attorneys, defense attorneys, they present the case, they're the jury, the bailiffs, and it's an attempt to use positive peer pressure to teach kids to do the right thing. And it's been very successful. It's been going on now, I believe, for in excess of 10 years. It's probably around 11, 12 years or so. And I think that that's very important. And I would like to have an open door with the administrators of Teen Court. I'd like to have an open door with the mayor, with the new city marshal, with the sheriff, because I want to solve the problems that we have. I want to work hard to address the problems that we have. And there's innovative ways that it can be done to where all ethical rules and moral responsibilities of the court are met, but I want an aggressive court that serves the people and that makes all of our lives better. And the reason I want that so desperately is I've got 5 kids. I want them to live here. I don't want to be a parent or grandparent that chases after my kids all over the country because they choose not to live here because we don't have a safe and secure community. So an open door policy is absolutely critical for us accomplishing the task before us.
Thank you. This next question, we will start with Mr. Downs. One of the largest concerns for citizens is the impact of special interests on elected officials. Statements have been made in this campaign that relative to special interests and its impact. Mr. Downs, and to Mr. Lester as well, what special interests are there in Bastrop that might have an impact on the judge's position, and how will you deal with those special interests?
Appreciate that question because I think it's vitally important to discuss what that is. In any small town, there are certain folks that feel like because of personal relationships or status or certain other matters that they may be above the law or are entitled to a special favor. And that's one of the reasons why I've emphasized throughout the campaign that I am independent, that I'm not going to be controlled by anyone, I'm not going to be influenced by anyone. And that's the core reason we have courts of law. If you'll remember, courts are about fundamental fairness for everyone. If you look at my campaign materials, I've gone to great efforts to stress the point that justice is about being fundamentally fair to all people, regardless of who you know, who you are, or your station in life. And this problem is not unique necessarily to Bastrop. It's not that Bastrop only has a special interest problem. Watch Fox News and you'll see about the special interest in Washington and everyone else. So in a court of law, I think the fundamental thing to remember is that the judge has got to be independent. The judge has got to give everyone a fair shake in court. When you start out in a case, each side starts out equally, and the judge only considers the evidence, the facts, and the law, and then rules accordingly. And that takes courage sometimes, because it's not necessarily going to be popular if it's somebody you've eaten lunch with or may see out at PT's or Lucky Village or someone that you know. And I think that that's what the special interest situation is and why it's vitally important, because for justice to prevail in a community, for us to have the respect, dignity, and to move our community forward, there has to be a sense that everyone gets a fair shake and there's no special favors or special deals for somebody because of relationships, particularly in a small town.
Mr. Lester?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I understood your question as to what specific special interest groups I was aware of, if I'm not mistaken.
I guess it speaks to comments that were made in ads that, as Mr. Downs said, that he would not be influenced by special interests. And my question were, who are the special interest group, and how would the judge, you as judge, deal with those special interest groups, if there be any?
Well, specifically, I'm not aware of any special interest groups that control me or anybody else. Most specifically, special interest can't exist in court. The purpose of any court is to be an administrator of justice, to be unbiased, to be fair, to be honest, and to be neutral. Now, with that said, in order to do that, you can't be involved in everything in the community as a judge. You can't be a cheerleader for every project that comes along. You can't contribute to everything that comes along. You can't put it in the paper when everything comes along that you have. The purpose of being a judge is to sit back, look at the facts, look at the law, and rule based upon what's presented to the court, not on who's sitting on the other side of the table or what attorney is representing those people or who's involved. If you're not willing to do that, you don't need to put your name on the ballot and you don't need to run. It's as simple as that. You're going to make tough decisions. It's going to require the hardest part, I think, of being a judge, and I said that in the paper in the article from the Bastrop Daily Enterprise the other day, is to make those tough decisions, regardless of who's there, and to hope that you have the wisdom in making those decisions according to the law. So a special interest doesn't exist in my campaign. It has not. It will not. And if I'm judge, I'll assure you I'm going to upset some people, and that's just part of the job. You hope that when you lay your head down at night that you've examined the facts, you've been honest, you've been dignified in the way you've treated people, you treated them with respect, and you hope that even though you may not rule for them, that they'll still respect you, they'll respect the system, and that's all you can do. And if you upset somebody, so be it. Maybe they won't elect you next time, or maybe they'll accept you and elect you for another term. But you can't have that, and it shouldn't exist in district court, city court, or any court. And I'll assure you that it won't exist in my court.
The next question will be starting with Mr. Lester. The law allows the city judge of Bastrop to engage in private practice as well as be city judge. Will you maintain an office at City Hall, and if so, how often do you plan to be in this office?
Well, Mayor, my response to that is I plan to be here as much as necessary. This office will be my number one priority. And if so be, I'll state it today, and I have before. If I have to give up my private practice to be city judge, I'm willing to do so. It's not something that I want to do because I enjoy my practice, I enjoy my clients, I've built a good business, but this is my number one priority. Most importantly, though, I feel like the practice that I have will coincide with the city court more than others in that The majority of my work is transactional related. I do a lot of loan closings, a lot of the state work. I don't have a lot of conflicts. I do no domestic work, and I try, when not necessary, not to be a litigator in court. So I can't see that it's going to create a lot of conflicts for me, but if it does, I'm willing to take whatever time is necessary to serve this court, serve this city, and make it my #1 priority.
Thank you. Mr. Downs.
Well, I'm going to be here daily, Mr. Mayor. I think that to run a court, you have to be here every single day. And the way that I'm able to do that is in my private practice, I have a seasoned attorney. His name's Mr. Ramsey Ogg. He's been with me for nearly 2 years, who has 25 years experience in the civil arena. So that gives me the freedom to put as much time into this position as necessary, up to 40 hours or more if required. That's what's allowed me to put 40, 60, 70 hours a week into this particular campaign and work hard for the last 5.5 months. I have a very well-trained and seasoned staff at my law firm. Mr. Ogg is very competent, does a great job, and can do a good job, has proven himself as recently as today to do those things. And one of the things that I think gives me unique qualifications in this particular job is this. I'm the only candidate who has a certified public accounting certificate. I am a CPA. I have a master's in business. I know how to ration my time, how to handle matters, and I think I've proven that time and time again. If you want to say I'm a cheerleader, I say yes I am, because I love Bastrop, and I make no apologies for it. If given the opportunity to help Bastrop or Morehouse be better in any way that I can be, I'll do it every single time as long as it's consistent with the law. So I do believe that you can be a cheerleader for Bastrop. I think Bastrop needs all the positive energy that it can possibly have, as long as it's done in an appropriate manner, and I'll continue to do that. And I have a system set up in place to where I will have more than enough time to devote to this court daily, as I said, up to 40 hours or more per week as necessary to deal with the problems that we may have. And finally, in conclusion of answering your question, you know, one of the things that I have that I think is unique too is I've served as a Special Assistant Attorney General. I was appointed as one for 9 years, and I had an opportunity to work with the Attorney General for the state of Louisiana on certain legal matters where I actually defended the doctors of the state. I've defended highway cases. I've defended various other cases. So my practice as well is broad-burst, and I think lends itself to being your judge.
Thank you very much. This next question will start with you, Mr. Downs. How often do you plan on holding civil court?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Civil court, from what I understand, and I've done some research into it, I believe now it's being conducted anywhere from 4 times every 6 to 8 weeks. And I don't believe that's enough time. I understand that there's a backlog in civil cases. So I would like to increase that immediately upon taking office to as many as 4 to 6 times per month, because that's an important component of justice. So many times my clients talk to me, or I have to share with my clients, about the delays that it takes to get justice, how the courts are backlogged, how slow the courts are. And I think it's imperative for our business community as well as for our litigants that we do things quickly. We don't want to do them so quick that we're not thorough and we don't analyze the situation thoroughly. I mean, we want to slow down and take care of business in a professional manner from that standpoint. But city courts in our state are designed to administer and to be able to provide quick justice and justice that's easier to obtain for individuals in our communities as opposed to district court. So I think that that's very important as well.
Thank you very much. The next question, Mr. Lester. Do you think the marshal's office should serve failure to appear and failure to pay warrants?
You want me to respond to the question Mr. Downs just answered
I'm
before
sorry,
I go on
did
to that
I
one?
not give you an opportunity? Help me stay on track, please. You be the judge.
You're out of order, Mayor. So, Well, going back to the first question, obviously, in running a court, you want it to be as efficient as possible. I think now, according to the research I've done, the criminal court is held approximately 4 times a month, the civil court 1 time a month. In some of those criminal days, they do hear some civil matters. You know, but with any job, it's going to be a learning curve with anything that you do. I'm going to make myself available. I'll have a court schedule just like they have in district court. When there's attorneys that request a trial, that schedule will be made available to them, and we'll set the trials as quick as possible, whether it's civil or criminal. And if that needs to be once, twice a week, we'll do whatever's necessary. So to answer it, you make yourself available for whatever the demand of the court system is and the caseload that's here. And if there's a backlog, we need to get those cases out, and so we can have some others and we move forward with those that are available. Going to your next question.
Now we're there. Do you think the marshal's office should serve failure to appear and failure to pay warrants, Mr. Lester?
Not only do I think they should, I think they're obligated to. I've researched this. I've talked to other judges about it, and the marshal is the chief executive officer of this court. They're obligated by law to serve those warrants when it's an order of the court. Now, I understand that in the past that's been a problem, and I will do whatever it takes to work with the newly elected marshal and the city to alleviate that problem, to help in any way I can to make that process move in an easier, quicker fashion. I also understand from my research that there is available to the marshal a special statute that allows him to assess his court costs, the service of warrants. So $25 a case. So the funds are there. The marshal's office has a budget. They get part of the court cost, and they also have the ability to ask the court to ask for additional court costs to make the service of these failure to appear warrants or any other warrant that may be outstanding. That can be simply done by the marshal's office walking across to the clerk, and before the fine is paid, having that paperwork necessary to assess that additional cost, which will help fund the additional deputies that may be necessary to do that. I also want to change the policy that we have in place now in city court and how that occurs. It is my intent to do away with some of these continuances and the extension of the fines that exist. I will allow people in the future, if they would like to plead guilty to a case, to go ahead and allow them to do so, to set their fine in the court costs, and give them an amount of time to pay that. However, I will defer the sentencing of that until that fine is paid. If they fail to do so at the time that they've agreed to, then I'll instruct the court to issue a bench warrant, have the marshal serve them, bring them in, arrest them. They'll either pay the fine or they'll go to jail. It's going to be as simple as that. We can't have extended costs going on and rolling on for months and months and months. Understand that from the clerk's office that as of right now, from July 2001 until the present, there's approximately $28,400 outstanding in failure to appear warrants. What I want to do is run an ad in the paper, give them a grace period to come in and pay it. If they don't, issue the bench warrants, have them arrested. And if time will allow it, I would expect the police officers, not as part of their regular duties, but if they pull someone over and they pull up the computers, and once we have those networked, they can see that an outstanding warrant exists, then they can bring those people in on those open warrants as well. But the majority of that duty is going to rest with the marshal's office. But of course, the police department should cooperate, because the whole purpose of what we're doing is trying to administer justice.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Downs.
Let me expand on that for those who may not know all the details of this, of what's currently going on in our city court. Right now, unfortunately, there's no one who is serving failure to appear warrants. And let me just share with you what that means. That means you can be cited to come to city court and just not show up, and essentially nothing happens other than the judge issues a bench warrant, and it goes on your record, so to speak. And if and only if you're stopped or flagged for something else, is there any accountability or responsibility? And that's not acceptable to me whatsoever. The city marshal is the person who's supposed to do that work. And why it's not being done, I can't answer that. I can tell you that under our court, it's going to be done, and it's going to be done in a major way in accordance with the law, because it goes to the very foundation of the authority of the court. The court, as you know, is the final straw, if you will, in the administration of justice. And if for the last several months or longer, word's been out on the street that the way you beat city court is you just don't show up, that's just not acceptable. And we've got to do a better job of never allowing anything like that to happen again, because it's demoralizing to the police. Imagine the police officer who's out on the street, short-staffed, as I indicated, 3 or 4 on a shift, where they go out and make an arrest, and then the suspect or the accused never shows up in court, and then nothing happens. You know, we have questions, and we're going to talk about the morale of the police department. But our police are vitally important. Without law and order, we don't have much of anything. And it goes back to what I talked about. It's those small-town values, and the reason why we all choose to live here is we want peace, we want security, we want to know that it's okay to go outside after dark and not have to worry about something happening to us. So I will work diligently with the marshal's office to see that failure to appear warrants are served, and they're served quickly.
Thank you very much. And we'll segue and spend some time talking about that, because you're talking about changes in the code and changes in the marshal's office. And Mrs. Downs, you'll be starting this question. Do you have any specific changes in mind for the city court? And as part of that, are you planning to make any changes to personnel in city court?
Insofar as changes in the court, the biggest substantive change that I can see, other than what we've already talked about, obviously we want to serve failure to appears. Obviously we want to have frequent enough court dates so there's no backlog. But in addition to that, this court has the ability to deal with the truancy issue. I was at a meeting last night of the Parent and Community Alliance of Morehouse Parish, where there were over 100 involved parents who want to see our kids educated, and they want to see the standards held higher for our children. And they're really taking a stand to try to improve things. This city court could be used as a truancy court. The statutory authority exists. It's been done in Rayville. I've talked to, I believe it was Judge Berry at the time, about how to do it approximately 6 months to a year ago. And that's the one major substantive addition that I'd like to see, because I want to see every one of our kids get an education. I want to see them in school, off the streets, and I want to see them be as productive as they can be. And my record establishes that. Many of the causes that I've undertaken are for our kids, whether it be our elementary kids at H.V. Adams and other elementary schools, including Prairie View, that I've been at, or Career Day, where I've tried to be positive and share with them about opportunities and about making wise choices and making the right decisions so that they can accomplish more and do well, as I want for my own kids. That's important. So substantively, the biggest thing would be to run truancy issues through here, to hold parents, children accountable, and to work with the schools to where we could get our school attendance as high as possible. Now, from an important standpoint, but not necessarily substantive, would be security in the courtroom. I would like to see us have a situation where there's metal detectors in the courtroom. I'd like to see the chambers area and the office area be protected, and the ladies have expressed concerns that work in city court about those issues. I've met with everyone who works in city court, and I have a good understanding of what each of their jobs are. And I have no plans whatsoever to make any changes in personnel. I've never gotten the first complaint from anyone about the jobs that they do. I believe that from an administrative standpoint, they all do their jobs appropriately. And again, I've talked to thousands of people over the last 5.5 months, and I've yet to get any complaint. If you got one, I want to know about it. Please call me, 281-7677, or at home, 283-5922. Thank you.
Okay. Let me repeat the question so you can get both parts of it, Mr. Lester. Do you have any specific changes in mind for city court? And as part of that, are you planning to make any changes to personnel in city court?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd like to address the second part first because I think it's going to be the easiest to answer. I, too, know the personnel here, and I've worked in this court for 16 years. They're very competent. They're proud of their job, and they do a good job. So at this time, I have no intentions of removing any of those personnel. As far as the specific changes to the court, you got to be careful with anything that you do. I mean, we're all different individuals, we're all professionals, and we all have different ways that we think may be the best way to do something. I will sit back and look at the court, and I have some changes that I think may be beneficial, but simply because I'm becoming a new judge, if I'm elected, doesn't mean that I'm going to change a lot of things. There will be some change just because of the way that I will choose to do things. First, the security issue needs to be addressed. We need to have a metal detector. We need to have a glass front for the office personnel because of the money that they take in to protect them. We need chambers that are protected. We need deputy marshals in court every time court appears. There's times where I've been over here where that has not been the case. We need security doors. There's a lot of things that we can do to make it a safer place, and we've been lucky that nothing's happened here to harm the public or the court, but it could happen at any time, so we need to address that. I may have a night court. There's a possibility that we could do that once a month from 5:30 to 8:30 to take money pleas, to hear arraignments for people who are working that are unable to be here. So that's something that we could address. It may be that the court could institute a probation officer in charge or assess fees to pay for that. Right now, there's no probation officer in the court to determine whether or not people are following up on the sentencing guidelines and the things that they're sentenced to that I'm aware of. That does exist in district court, and it is a possibility, and the law provides for that through the city court if needed. They have that in West Monroe City Court. They have that in Monroe City Court. The difference being, obviously, is they have a bigger tax base. I want to address just for a second the truancy problem, though. That is a problem, and it's something we should be concerned about. But it's already being addressed, and it's being addressed by the school board who have contracted recently with the Sheriff's Department and Mike Tubbs in paying an officer to do that every month and every day to get the information from the school board as to who's missing. That's being handled through the district court, and I can tell you why it's being handled through the district court. It's because they have a specific division of juvenile court by Judge Marchman that handles those matters. Not only do they handle it, the lack of funds in the city makes it almost impossible to handle the truancy. We don't have our juvenile matters. We don't have the ability to house these juveniles. It costs $135 a day to house a juvenile in Green Oaks. We can't do it here. The city jail is not adequate. The district sheriff's office is not adequate. So the only way we can do it is go to Monroe and pay them that money. Right now, the parish is paying that, and we are not. So it's something that may be considered, but it's something we need to look at from a money standpoint.
Thank you. Okay, tell me, where did I start the last time? Mr. Downs started? You answered the question first?
I believe I did,
Okay.
Mayor.
It's been alluded to, and there is the perception that police officers in the city of Bastrop have a lot of frustration. They have frustration in terms of not having their efforts supported by city court. How would you deal with that perception or the reality of that frustration, Mr. Downs? Mr. Lester, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, to me, that's going to be simple. If you do your job, it'll take care of itself. And so I'll support them in whatever they do, but I'll support them within the bounds of the law. Again, the most important part of any court is I can't walk in City Hall or this police department over there and say, okay, guys, let's all get around the table and tell you I'm going to put everybody in jail that y'all bring in here. That's not what the purpose of the court is. I'll support them. If the facts of the case and the law warrant putting somebody in jail, then I intend to do that. I think simply by my actions in supporting them when the district attorney or the city attorney does their job in presenting the facts of the case and the law, and it warrants convictions, then we'll warrant those convictions with the nature of the crime that exists. You can only do that by supporting them when it calls for it. The penalties that people get must go along with what's occurring. The statutes call for mandatory jail time for battery of a police officer. I have no problem with that. We've got to protect the efforts that they do, the things that they do. We got to make it worth their time and effort to arrest people, to protect our community. And if we fail to do that, then they're simply going to ride around in their cars and hand out speeding tickets because it's the easiest thing to do. That isn't what they want to do, and I've talked to some of these officers. But simply by doing your job, supporting them when they do theirs, and the city attorney does their job, your actions and how you sentence people and deal with the public will take care of their frustrations and their disappointment if it exists at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Downs?
I think the way that you alleviate some of the frustrations of the city police is, for instance, I can't imagine how frustrated I'd be if the criminals don't show up in court, or the accused, the defendants don't, and nothing happens. I mean, that would drive me ludicrous. That'd drive me batty. So I believe it's taking care of business. It's seeing things through their eyes from the standpoint of appreciating and recognizing what they do on a daily basis. And then it's having real consequences for wrongful conduct. I think that's what the police want, is they want a judge who's going to be fundamentally fair, that's going to expect that they perform their job and deal with the community in a professional manner and don't abuse their power. But at the same time, if they bring a case to the court, and when we weigh the evidence and we look at the evidence as your judge, if the evidence shows that there's been a violation of a statute or an ordinance or whatever else may apply, the officers just want there to be fair and impartial administration of justice. And I think that's the way that you eliminate and you deal with some of their concerns and some of their frustration. And again, I ask that we please staff the police department. People on the street tell me that all the time, that they call, and it's not because our officers that we have aren't good. They say that they call and they take too long. It's not because the ones that we have aren't trying. It's that we don't have enough police officers. I believe that we need more, and we need them desperately, and it's been a long-term need, and it's time that someone started talking about that need. You, the voters, have told me all about it, about the need for city police to take care of business, to protect our kids, to protect our seniors, and that sort of thing. And let me just address the misconception by my opponent about how you deal with truancy. He made it sound like you deal with truancy. It's already being dealt with, and the only way this court could do it would be to put juveniles in Green Oaks and cost the city or taxpayers thousands of dollars. That's not correct. The way that it was done in Rayville through the city court, there's a state statute that applies directly on point. And what it says is that after the appropriate methods are done, and if parents don't get their kids to school in a timely manner, the parents are held responsible. And that eliminates any additional costs from the standpoint of juveniles and having to put juveniles anywhere. The only additional expense would be having to have someone to help maybe administer the program. And I believe that from a judicial oversight and administrative standpoint, our kids in school, our kids being educated, and it being done here locally with the judge who deals with the sheriff as well as the new chief of police is well worth every penny that'll be spent.
Thank you. The next question goes back to the failures to appear. What is or are your thoughts as to the handling of people who are guilty of one or more failures to appear in city court? Who starts that?
I think it's me, Mr. Mayor, but I could be off.
Go ahead, please.
All right. Failure to appear, as I've mentioned earlier, it has to do with the respect for the court. You know, I was raised and brought up by my parents that if someone in authority says you better be somewhere on time, dressed appropriately, you be there and you do what's right. And so the mayor's specific question was, what do you do in a situation where you have somebody who just continuously, 2 or more times, blows off the court, blows off the police officer that's sitting up here ready to go forward, blows off the prosecutor who doesn't have the respect for the taxpayers' money that we're paying to have a police officer sit in this court ready to go, the prosecutor ready to go, and the judge ready to go, and they don't bother to show up. I have no patience for that. Zero. None. Now, that's me thinking as a general matter. Now, I've got to follow the law, and whatever the appropriate range of sentencing is for that type of offense, I will follow the law. But I can tell you, as a general matter and a general principle, wasting the taxpayers' money, wasting the police officer's time who needs to be on the street, wasting my time, it's not going to be a real good intervention when we see you for the third time. So please, we just want a court that takes care of its business. We want our community to be responsible. We want our officers to be responsible. We want our judge to do his job. And we want our prosecutor to do their job. Because what it's all about for me and for our campaign is this. We want Bastrop and Morehouse to be that safe, small-town, values-oriented, community-type environment where we all have opportunity and enjoy our lives in peace and solitude, which is why we're here to begin with.
Mr. Lester?
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, the public should understand, I think, what we're dealing with in city court from a criminal matters is simply misdemeanors. So it doesn't matter what occurs that comes through the court. The maximum amount of time that you can give anybody in jail in this court is 6 months. Now, that doesn't occur too often, from what I understand. But the way to handle the failure to appears initially is to give progressive contempt of court fees or fines for doing so. So, and the law provides for that. Simply in the change of policy of whoever takes over, whether it's myself or Mr. Downs, if you put an ad in the paper and you let the public know from the beginning that things are going to change, that you'll have an opportunity to come in, pay your fines that are outstanding, your failure to appears, and a late fee for doing so, and those will be dropped. For those that fail not to do that, and you have them arrested, you issue the bench warrants, you come in, you set their bonds, you increase the bond each time that they fail to appear, and you increase the cost. And if they fail to do that, you put them in jail. Now, I'm assured that most of the people, from what I'm understanding, even if they claim they don't have the money, if they put them in jail, some magical way they appear with the money within a couple of hours. And I don't believe that it will change anyway as long as people are aware that the policy of the court is going to change. Now, that's going to go along with the cooperation of the marshal's office and the city attorneys. And you're going to have to sit down and work together with all these individuals to make this a better system. And it can be done. It's not going to be a complicated process. I've already discussed it with Judge Scott Lehigh, was a former city Monroe judge, as well as Jim Norris, the current West Monroe City judge, and the things that they've done to alleviate this problem. There are going to always be certain people that you'll never serve, you'll never find, just like there's accounts receivables in my businesses and others that you can't collect. And that's going to always exist. People move out of state, they leave, you can't locate them, and the money and effort and time is not there to be able to reach them or find them. But for those that can be found, the simple way to handle it is to increase the cost that they have to pay, let them know you're serious about them appearing in court, work with the marshal's office to have them arrested, increase their bonds so that they're on the line if they fail to appear again, or the bonding company, and put them in jail as a last resort if you have to.
Thank you very much. Louisiana has been involved in the last few years in some serious ethics legislation, and part of it is financial disclosure. And according to state law, a person who's seeking a public office must report all money spent. I think if it's over $250, and if you guys have spent more than $250, this will be applicable to you. Based on your last financial disclosure report filed, what was the amount of money that you have spent on this campaign in this race so far? And let's see who starts that question.
I believe I do.
Okay, Mr. Lester, thank you. Well, this is a test part to see if they're honest in their format. Mr. Lester?
Since my whole campaign is based upon honesty and integrity, I'll be glad to answer that.
That wasn't a freebie now.
Based upon my report that was due on September the 4th, the amount of money that I've spent in regards to the expenses in this election was approximately $35,000 to $36,000. And I don't have the exact figure, but that was what it was. And that's been sent to the Secretary of State, the Board of Ethics. You can pull that up on the website. You can see who contributed to my campaign. You can see what I've spent my money on. There's no political consultants there. It's simply what it is. And if you look at it, it's that amount, $35,000 to $36,000.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I believe, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but the amount of money total that I've spent on advertising and everything under the sun is around $138,000, $135,000 is the total amount that I've spent. And let me share with you why I've done that. I feel that it's important that if you're going to do something, you do it wholeheartedly. And that's why I've also worked so hard to try to get to the people, visit with folks on a one-on-one basis and share with them what we're trying to do with and what we're trying to accomplish with this court. I think it's very important that when you do something, you don't expect it to be handed to you. You expect that you have to work for it. And that's what I've tried to do holistically. So when I do something, I put my heart and soul into it. I work very hard, and I'm proud of the fact that the community has responded appropriately by contributing a sizable amount to my campaign. And as Mr. Lester indicated, my information is also listed with the Secretary of State on their website, and you can see who specifically contributed funds to my campaign and that sort of thing as well. But I want to share with you why, again, it's so important, is because I'm going to do what I need to do to make this court the very best that it can be. I'm going to work very hard and tirelessly, and I'm going to put my whole effort into it in order to be the very best judge that we can be and have the very best court that we can have. And another thing I think is important is, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it and I've got extra time, is this. City court has a lot of flexibility to address problems and concerns. It's statutorily created, but it can do different things to help different people in different ways, and it can be expansive. You have some city courts that have different jurisdictional limits. Our court has a jurisdictional limit of $15,000. Other courts can go up to $30,000, $35,000 by special legislation. And that would be another thing that I'd like to consider doing, is increasing the amount potentially in the civil arena of what our court handles, because again, this court can be used in a speedy manner to deal with things in a much easier manner than district court is and be more accessible to the people.
Thank you very much. As we've been preparing for this election, our staff has had an opportunity to visit the structures of courts of similar sizes, courts and marshal's office of similar sizes. And this might be redundant to the question about changes. And looking at the West Monroe, Ruston, Monroe is much larger, court and marshal's office, it appears that in those systems, the marshal's office takes a lot of prerogative with the courts as far as collecting fines and serving warrants and repossessing cars and things of that nature. And this is one of those toss-up questions. Have you considered working with the marshal's office, police department, city administration, and restructuring the functioning of both the court and the marshal's office to make it more effective? And I think we start with Mr. Downs on this one.
Okay. I got to understand the question because it was very long. And
it was.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a judge, a lawyer, doesn't it?
Well, I want to be sure before I answer I understand what I'm answering.
Compared to other courts, our court martial and city court has different kind of limitations. The city marshal's office doesn't do a lot. Fines are collected in the city court. In West Monroe and Ruston, the fines are collected in the marshal's office. Marshal's offices are larger in that they go out and they serve warrants. They do various law enforcement kind of things, but relative to the court, enforcing more court orders. And this is one of those things. Have you considered any enlarging or changing of the structure of the marshal's office, the court, as it relates to the police department and all the rest of that? Just one of those opinion kind of things. Looking, visioning.
Well, from a vision standpoint, you know, I've talked to the current clerk of court, and from what I understand, the computer system between the city court and the marshal's office are not totally compatible, nor is the computer system from city court to the police department fully compatible. And so if that question encompasses that, because I'm still not quite sure, you know, I think that we've got to have all three of these primary offices able to communicate with one another. And let me share why that's important. As I understand it, there's times when police may make traffic stops or other types of stops, and for whatever reason, because of the incompatibility of the computer systems between the police department and city court, there may be something outstanding on a person and the police miss it, not because they don't know what they're doing or they're incompetent, but just because of the lack of compatibility in the computer systems. So to address your question in that regard, I think that's something that needs to be immediately worked on because we certainly want to have computer systems that are integrated, that are networked, and that we can share data and share information on. Now, insofar as making very large substantive changes to the whole interoperations of the city marshal's office and the judge's office, or for that matter, with the police department, I can't sit here and say I've thought of those or gotten into that great of detail. I don't think that, from what I'm familiar with, we have large problems in that way. However, I do think that the computer system is something that we can do simply. It's something that we should do immediately so that we get the most bang for the buck and we're not having to enter data duplicatively. And what I mean by that is we've got people at this court doing certain data entry. We've got people at the police department doing data entry. And if the city marshal as well, if we could consolidate some of those efforts, I think that we could save the taxpayers as well as the court and all three offices a good deal of money.
Thank you. Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I've also looked into the fact of the computer systems that we have, and I understand that there's technology grants that have been granted to the city in huge amounts of money that are available to implement certain technologies that just have not occurred for whatever reason. I'm not sure of that reason, but obviously if I'm elected, I want to sit down with the city council and the mayor and the chief of police, the marshal, and look into whatever can be done to make it run more efficiently and make it easier for everybody. I would like to see those systems networked, but at the same time, you got to be careful with the privacy laws and what you will allow to be networked and what they can obtain and keep people from hacking into one system to the next. So, and I think that's some of the problems that they've had in implementing the technology that's available for the courts or the computer systems to be networked together. There are certain courts and systems that have the laptops, computers, so that the police officers can pick up when they stop someone to see if there's an outstanding warrant there. And that would probably help with our failure to appears if we had that ability. I know we have the laptops. I don't think we have the networking at this time to be able to do that. As far as changing the functioning of the court, I thought about it, but it's something that I think you're going to have to go into slowly. You're going to have to meet with the right personnel to see what you want changed and how we're going to change it. And I'm not sure that some of it may not even require some type of new legislature by some of our representatives to do that. So I'm not against that. It's something you got to look into and explore, but I don't think we want to move too quickly on anything that we do and just look at all the options that are available.
Thank you very much. This is a two-part question submitted from two-level questions, two questions submitted by someone in the audience. On a burglary, would you let the person go without giving up the goods? That's question number one. And number two, if a question had a doctor's exemption on a seat belt, will you accept the doctor's excuse? I think we start with Mr. Lester on this.
Could you repeat that first question?
Okay, first one, in a burglary, and I'll take them again as much as we need to. On a burglary, would you let the person go without giving up the goods? This is the burglar, I'm assuming. On a burglary, would you let the person go without giving up the goods? And I'll ask the second question later on. Again.
Well, first of all, I think I have to be careful on how I answer that because I don't believe the Code of Judicial Conduct would allow me to say that I'm going to put somebody in jail for a burglary. I do think that the statutory provisions provide that restitution is an available remedy for a burglary or any theft. And so if the question is pertaining to whether or not I think restitution is one of the remedies that should exist besides jail time, then obviously my answer to that would be yes.
Okay. Second question is, if a person had a doctor's exemption on a seatbelt, would you accept the doctor's excuse?
I would accept it depending on the condition and what the doctor tells me. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule. So you have to be open-minded enough in anything that you do to realize that everything's not black and white. And if somebody has a physical problem that prevents them from wearing a seatbelt, then I would examine that. I would probably talk to the doctor personally, as well as the police officer and the patient or the person that was given the ticket for failure to wear the seatbelt. But you have to be open-minded as a judge, and nothing can be black and white. So you just have to look at the facts and what's presented to you, talk to the physicians. But I would be willing to do that if it warranted that situation.
Yes. Mr. Downs, I'll repeat for you as well. On a burglary, would you let the person go without giving up the good?
As my opponent was answering that, I don't think I can answer either question because what you're saying is, in a specific case, what are you going to rule? And I think it's unethical to answer the question. And the Code of Judicial Conduct is clear that you can talk about what your general perceptions are and your general feelings are, but in a case-specific question, you can't say how you're going to rule because that's what the courtroom is for. So I'm not going to answer the question, not because I'm being evasive, but I don't think it's ethical to answer it specifically. I can tell you that I will hear what the reasons are insofar as the seatbelt issue, that I'll apply the law fairly, honestly. I will do the same with the burglary type situation. I certainly understand that it's important to recover goods if appropriate, or for there to be an appropriate penalty that restores and makes the victim whole, and I believe in those general principles of law. But to answer the question specifically would be having me to commit a violation of the Code of Judicial Conduct, and I'm not going to do that.
Thank you. We were made aware before this forum by I think one or both of you that there is a delicateness involved in this because you are prohibited from giving opinions about what you would do and rules. So they weren't avoiding the question. They were doing what they have been trained and what is legally appropriate. Mr. Downs, will you answer questions presented by people filing suits in your court, or will you instruct them to contact an attorney? Again, will you answer questions presented by people filing suits in your court, or will you instruct them to contact an attorney?
As I understand the question, you're asking me, will I give people in my court legal advice? And the obvious answer is no, I can't do that. The Code of Ethics, the Judicial Code of Conduct says that if I have a matter pending in my court, I can't have someone calling me and asking, hey, Ross, what to do? And I said it earlier, the only way that you can talk about a pending case is if you have all parties to the dispute, whether it's a criminal or civil case, represented and before you. In the law, it's a big fancy word. It's called, you just can't do that. So it's not that you want to be tough or hard to deal with. That's not the point. The point is that the judge can't give legal advice to folks. So the judge would either not take the call or have a deputy clerk of court say that you need to seek legal advice and that we recommend that you contact an attorney of your choosing as soon as possible. And the reason we would do that, again, is not to be disrespectful or to not answer the question, but in a pending matter before our court, we can't give legal advice. That's an absolute no-no.
Thank you. Mr. Lester?
Thank you, Mayor. I would have the same opinion. You'd have to be very careful in not giving legal advice. I would instruct the personnel that would work for the city court to explain the procedures, the time delays, the periods that they may have to file an answer, but also instruct them to obtain an attorney if necessary for what they're trying to do. I mean, the law does provide for people to appear in proper person in court, and they're willing to do that, and that happens especially in city court and small claims court, and it happens as well in district court. But depending on their question, if they ask you legal advice, you could not answer that. You got to be careful because there's some new law legislation passed for judges that you have to absolutely recuse yourself if there's any conflict or of anything that you've worked on in the past. So you have to examine those cases when they come through and make sure, especially since we're going to have a private practice and have in the past, that there's not a conflict of interest that would exist. But you'd have to tread a very fine line there in trying to talk to people if they called in with questions regarding their lawsuit, other than simple procedure matters.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Lester, if you'll start with this question. What do you consider a reasonable turnaround time for judgments to be rendered? What do you consider a reasonable turnaround time for judgments to be rendered?
If I'm not mistaken, the law provides for 30 days for the court to make a decision, and depending on each case and the caseload, those could obviously be answered or judgments to be rendered obviously before that. I'll do everything possible to be prepared enough that at the conclusion of each case, if possible, to render my judgment at that time. But like all judges do, there are times when you take certain cases under advisement and you review the documents that have been presented, maybe read the depositions, the medical testimony, whatever's been presented, research the law, and issue written reasons for your findings based upon what you've heard. So it isn't always possible to do that on the day of court, but when possible, I'll do that as quickly as possible and get those judgments out and have people the options to either appeal it or pay the judgments as they exist.
Okay. Mr. Downs, should I repeat?
Yes, sir, if you would, quickly.
What would be, what do you consider a reasonable turnaround time for judgments to be rendered?
Well, it certainly depends on the facts and circumstances, but I would hope within a week to 10 days would be something that I would try to accomplish, if possible, because I understand that the public, particularly in a court like this, would like cases to be handed down, rulings to be handed down as quickly as possible. But you can't always do that in every case. I believe the law generally provides for up to 30 days unless there's some exceptional circumstances where the judge were to ask the attorneys in court to brief additional issues or to file papers with the court explaining their position. So as a general matter, I would like to do it as quickly as I can once I'm certain of what the ruling is and after everything has been weighed in accordance with the law.
Very good, thank you. This has to do again with the relationship and the operation between the court and the marshal's office. As the newly elected judge, would you share the court costs that are received as a result of this service in order to help offset the expense of additional deputies? This is related to the failures to appear. As a newly elected judge, would you share the court costs that are received as a result of these failure to appear warrants being served to help offset the expenses of additional deputy marshals? That's assuming that we get the failures to appear, failure to act warrants, failure to pay warrants served, and it requires additional deputy marshals. Would you be willing to share proceeds from the court to do that? And let's see, we start up, I think, with Mr. Downs on this.
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to look at the law carefully. I can say this, I would sit down with the marshal's office and try to figure out why this hadn't already been being done and being dealt with in an appropriate manner, at least in my eyes, as to why we haven't been following through on it. And if it's legal and if it's necessary that the court share some of the fees or monies that are collected in reference to failure to appears, and we can come up with some type of equitable situation that passes legal muster, well, obviously we'll do that. Because again, the failure to appears are very, very important. You talk about the morale of the police department. You talk about the authority of the court. You talk about the rule of law, is that we've got to hold people responsible. We've got to have consequences for conduct, and just blowing off the court is not acceptable, and the marshal as well as the judge's office needs to do everything that we can do to make sure that we tend to that problem as soon as possible. So the answer to your question is yes, if it's legal, I would certainly do so.
Okay. Should I repeat, Mr. Lester?
No, sir. No.
Thank you.
I researched this even before we had these questions because I already knew it was a concern of the marshals. I talked to them, and according to what I've been able to determine based upon the law, that's not a possibility. I don't believe the law allows the court to share court costs for the service of failure to appear warrants or any warrants. I would love to do that. It's legally allowed us to do it, but I don't believe that it's statutorily appropriate. It goes back to the fact that the marshal's office is the administrator or the chief executive officer of the court. It's its obligation to serve the warrants. It has a budget. It attains part of the court cost through mandated by the state. And as I discussed earlier, they also have the ability to request the court to assess additional court costs in the amount of $25 for the service of these warrants. So it's already there. There's a place for it. The marshal has a budget, and they can work that into their budget. And it's also available through the city because the city, I believe, helps with the funding of the marshal's office. Some of the contempt fees, according to the judges that I've talked to, Judge Norris and Judge Lehigh, may be available to help warrant or pay some of those fees if they occurred. But most of the judges in the area have always handled that by what I've talked about, the statutory allowance of allowing the marshal to come to the court and say we had additional cost of serving this warrant. We would like that assessed as court cost and doing it that way. And that's the way to fund it. That's how they fund it in other courts, and that's how it can be funded here. And as I talked about earlier, once you change the policy of the court and the way you allow people to plead the cases and pay their fines in the way that they would expect the court and being consistent in the treatment of this, I don't suspect that that's going to be a big problem in the future, but it's going to be a problem, but it can be addressed. And I'll do whatever possible to work with the marshal's office in the city to make that, to make it work, make it accessible as cheap as possible. And I'll be willing to grant the additional court costs that they can assess on each one that they have to go out and do.
Thank you. This is another question from the audience. And this is one of those no right and wrong answers because it's your feeling. Why would you think that you are qualified now to be a judge when you have not been earlier? Why would you think that you are qualified now to be a judge when you have not been earlier? I think we start with Mr. Lester on that.
Well, I'd have to take dispute with anybody that said I wasn't qualified earlier. I think the most important thing in anything that you do is experience. Now, at this stage in my career, I've had 16 years of practicing law, 16 years of dealing with everything that occurs here in city court, so that you would hope with that experience and knowledge that I've gained enough wisdom that I can now sit here and make the right decisions. But like I indicated earlier, that's a difficult task, and it's difficult for any judge to have the wisdom to make those right decisions. But if you're consistent, you're qualified, which I think I am, you're knowledgeable of the law, and you're timely in what you do, and you're fair and you're honest, and you make an effort to work hard, then that'll all take care of itself. And I'm willing to do those things. I'm very open-minded. I'm a good listener. I'm not afraid to make tough decisions, and I try each and every day, no matter what, regardless of who I'm dealing with. I want people to feel good about me. I want to treat them like they've got their money's worth when they deal with me. I want to be fair, honest. I want to treat them with the integrity and the respect and dignity that they deserve, and I'll do the same thing in city court. I feel like I am qualified. I can handle anything here. I do it day in and day out. I'm just going to be sitting on the other side of the table there. So, and I think I'm qualified now. I think I'm more qualified now than I was 6 years ago when I ran against Judge Brandon, and that's simply because of age and experience. And I would hope that anybody that's been practicing law or anybody in life in general that's had the opportunity to gain knowledge and more experiences, have more trials, deal with more people, would gain the wisdom and knowledge that they need in order to be a judge.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Downs.
I believe I'm qualified to be judge because of my broad experience, and let me share with you a little bit of those things. As I indicated previously, I graduated from Loyola Law School. I've been practicing law in Bastrop. It'll be 15 years this October. I think it's 8th to be exact. So just shy of 15 years practicing law. I graduated from Loyola Law School with law review honors. That's just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo for meaning you're supposed to be able to read, be smart, and know what you're doing. I also graduated with moot court honors. That means that I know how to try cases and put things together. And that's a rare combination to graduate with honors in both. I also have professional accounting experience from the standpoint of having a master's in accounting. I think that's going to aid me immensely with these administrative type issues about keeping up with monies, about making sure that we're responsible there. The other thing is serving as a special assistant attorney general, I think gives me a unique perspective on the practice of law. And then another thing that I think that I have that's very strong and is going to be helpful is I listen to people, I figure out what problems are, and then I deal with them. And I've shown that in a variety of ways. Before I helped Morehouse General Hospital obtain Rural Hospital Coalition designation to get them more money on a yearly basis, there wasn't a playbook for how to do it. But me and others who were working together with our legislative delegation figured out how to get it done and make it happen to help our hospital. There's other community things that I've done that took figuring out how to make something go, how to make it work, and putting it to its best use. I have practiced in the civil arena in a broad-based area. I've done domestic work earlier in my career. I've also been the city attorney for the city of Collinston in my past, and I gained experience from that. Going through law school, I believe it was approximately 2 years, I was the law clerk for the cities of Gretna and Westwego, and Gretna is a town about the same size as Bastrop, perhaps even a little larger, where I had the ability to work closely on municipal law issues and to deal with the city court there as well as the city judge and the city attorney. So I think that broad base of experience, I'm also admitted in 3 states. I was able to pass the Arkansas bar exam in the last few years without missing a beat, passed it on the first occasion, also passed the Mississippi bar exam. And so I'm able to learn things quickly. I'm a quick learner. I like to listen. And yes, I like to promote and help Bastrop. I like to see our people do well, and I want to see our kids educated and as many improvements holistically in our community as we can possibly make.
Okay, Mr. Downs, will you be available after hours and on weekends to law enforcement to sign warrants and set bonds? Will you be available after hours and on weekends to law enforcement to sign warrants and set bonds?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, let me just share with the public a little bit about that. The police are very concerned about that, and they were even more concerned before we had a district judge. As you'll recall, Danny Ellender was elected with no opposition as our district court judge and when he qualified and was the only one to qualify back in July. So now we've got a resident district court judge, and of course we'll have a city judge as well. Previously, before Mr. Ellender, or Judge Ellender was our judge, many of our sheriff's deputies as well as city police were dependent upon the city court, who has statutory authority to sign warrants, and needed to be in close contact with city court. Because you might imagine there may be some reason for a criminal drug bust or something that's going on where a search of a house or search of a vehicle is required. And I've already communicated with our sheriff, and I'll say this on the record clearly to our new chief of police and others, that I'm going to be available. I'm not a huge traveler from the standpoint of frequency of being gone. I'm usually at home on weekends. I will definitely be available 24 hours a day. Wake me up in the middle of the night if necessary, because I want to see crime diminished in our community. That's what's important to me. I want to see Bastrop be everything that it can be, and I want to do my part to make it as good as it can be. And if that means being woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to sign a warrant, I'll do it. If it means telling the police my travel plans or where I may or may not be, if I've got a kid's game or something like that that I've got to be to, or my cell phone number, I will certainly do it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. I as well will be available. I think Judge Brandon has always been available, from what I understand, to sign those warrants, and that's just part of the job. You take the good with the bad, and if somebody has to wake you up in the middle of the night to sign a warrant, or listen to or read an affidavit to see if there's probable cause to issue that warrant, then you do so. You do so because it's part of your obligation as a judge. It's what you accept when you put your name on the ballot to run, and it goes without saying. So I think it will be beneficial that Judge Ellender now is elected here in Morehouse Parish, because it will give the officers, two judges now, to run down, chase, whatever the case may be, to sign those warrants or execute them if necessary. So it can only be a better process for the city and the sheriff's office to have those available, and I'll be willing to do so.
Thank you. We're almost there. Mr. Lester, how do you feel about tougher sentences for repeat offenders?
Well, I think it's absolutely necessary. And from what I understand and talking to most of the court personnel here, different judges in city courts, West Monroe and Monroe, it seems that city court, because of the misdemeanor nature of the crimes that are involved, has much more repeat offenders than possibly in the district court. So again, it's going to be to the policy that you set to the public, the awareness that you have to them, to make them aware that if you continue to do the same thing over and over, that you can expect to be punished for that. And I have no problem with doing so with people who are in here over and over for the same thing. You can expect to go to jail for 6 months if you commit a battery for the 5th time, or if you beat up your husband or wife for the 3rd time, or whatever the case may be based upon the warrants and the facts of the case. I would explain to people that when they plead guilty, that if they appear here again, I'm not going to just look at the facts. I'm going to look at your history. And if you are in court for the same things over and over, you can expect to suffer the consequences of doing that. Hopefully, with just a little bit of time, that you'll deter people from doing that, and they'll realize that the city court is a place that's serious about protection of children and the elderly, that we want a cleaner and safer community. But that's with repeat offenders, and I will expect that to be the case, and I will let the city attorney know that that's the way I'm going to conduct it, and I'll also do my best early on to let the public know that that's the way it's going to be.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Downs.
Again, we got to be careful saying what sentences we're going to definitely give in a case, because that's unethical. So I'm not going to say exactly what I'm going to do, because I don't want to be unethical. But what I will say is that I'll use our discretion wisely, and that as a general matter, which I am allowed to comment on, repeat offenders I have no patience for as well. And the reason is because it goes back to the rule of law, the respect and integrity of the court, as well as the respect and service of our police officers that risk their lives on a daily basis, as well as the victims. Oftentimes in crimes, the victims are forgotten. And it's a recent movement over about the last 10 years or so that victims' rights have been advocated by certain folks that are cheerleaders for that cause. We want to see victims recognized. We want to see that we fully understand and appreciate the victims of crime. And when you've got a repeat offender, that's a serious, serious matter that requires serious, serious consideration and serious, serious consequences, assuming that the repeat offender status has been proven. So, as a general matter, the word will get out in short order that we're not going to tolerate that, and we're going to use what's at our disposal and what's at our discretion to deter that kind of conduct. And if you want to do that type of thing, you probably ought to go somewhere else because you're not going to get away with it here.
Thank you. This is the last question. This is a freebie. And following this question, we will do the wrap-up. How would you propose to keep drugs and other crimes away from our children and your children in the Morehouse Parish schools? How would you propose to keep drugs and other crimes away from your children and our children in the Morehouse Parish schools? Mr. Downs.
Well, I'm not sure of the specific nature of the question from the standpoint of how it's different, but let me just share this with you. Somebody that's dealing drugs to our kids, that's why if you go back and look at my campaign materials, one of the earliest things I said as a general matter is we're going to protect our seniors, we're going to protect our children, and we want our schools to be safe. So predators on kids, as far as I'm concerned, as a general matter, that's just, there's zero tolerance for that. And then I use my discretion in accordance with the law to do specifically what the law allows me to do. Now, the way that you deter that kind of conduct is there's statutory provisions already, and you may have seen it, that there's enhanced penalties in particularly district court for doing something inappropriate at school, bringing a gun to school, dealing or selling drugs within so many feet of a school. In all honesty, drug issues, with the exception of marijuana offenses and DWIs, are beyond the jurisdiction of this court. This court here, city court, can deal with marijuana first offense and possibly other seconds, as well as it's marijuana and DWI are the two. I think it's DWI first. So I don't want to give the illusion that we can deal with more than that here at city court. But vigorous enforcement of the law and letting it be known that our kids are not to be messed with. Our kids are our future. Our kids are where we hope to have additional leaders born and bred, and that we want the very best for our kids, and a court that vigorously enforces the law and uses everything at its disposal to protect our schools, protect our kids, and to facilitate the learning process. And again, that's why I think truancy is so important. If the district court handles it without the need of city court intervention, so be it. But if it can be improved and it can be dealt with and it can be done cheaply through our city court, I want to see our teachers, I want to see our kids, I want to see our administrators make the very best accomplishments and move our kids forward, because that's the way we're going to get jobs and job opportunities, is to have an educated workforce and more opportunities for all our people.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, as Mr. Downs has indicated, we're obviously not going to be hearing felony drug cases in city court. It's nothing more than misdemeanor court. And that would consist of possession of marijuana and DWI first and second offenses. But, the key to anything with drugs-related offenses and children are involved is education. That's the reason you see it in your schools, you see it on TV. You have to continue to educate the young children as to what to look for and what to expect. And the court can be a part of that. You can work with the school board, maybe have them bring classes, civic classes into court to watch a trial, to educate them as to prosecuting of criminals for those offenses. Just get them introduced to the system and how it works in the process. The drug-free zones, trying to enforce those, but mainly showing the public that you're serious about protecting our kids and what exists, that you will protect them from that, and based upon what you receive, based upon the facts and the law, and having your sentences go along with what dictates what's presented in court by the city attorney and the police officers is the biggest influence that I can see that you'll have as city judge.
Thank you very much. And now we're at the close. Is that what you guys call it in court, closing? We give you each 2 minutes to make your closing statement, starting with you, Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mayor. The first thing I want to do is thank everybody that's here tonight. I appreciate you taking an interest in this. I appreciate you taking an interest in this race. It's definitely an interesting race. For everyone that's watching, thank you for taking the time to watch this. I hope that the things that you've learned tonight, if you learned a little bit of both about myself and Mr. Downs, and I hope that something has convinced you to vote for me, number 69, this Saturday, October the 4th. I set out several months ago. My most important mission in this whole election was to be myself, to show people that I was qualified to run a positive campaign, and I emphasize that. Very positive, to not be negative, and that's been very difficult. I've ignored the negative ads, the untruths, the exaggerations, and I want you to elect me because of me, not because of what I spent or didn't spend, not by what I gave out or didn't give out. You elect me because I promise to be an honest judge, an unbiased judge, open-minded, hard-working, neutral, dignified, respectful, all the characteristics that you want in a judge. And I promise to do that. I'll make my office available. I'll spend the time needed to make this a better court, to help the city in any way possible. And I promise to do that. And I promise to make it my number one priority. Give me that opportunity, and I appreciate the support that I've gotten from everyone, the calls, the contributions, in whatever way. I appreciate the opportunity to have met a lot of people, and I still have a few days to go, and if I haven't met you, I hope that I can. If you have any questions, I want you to call me. You can call my office, you can call my home. I'm willing to answer whatever I can to try to ease your mind or convince you that you need to vote for me this week. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Downs, your close.
I would like to, first of all, say thank you to the people that have tuned in tonight and paid attention to the race, because I think it's vitally important. And I hope that you've learned some information that will assist you in casting your vote. And I want to encourage and let everyone know that you are important. Your vote is important. And, you know, one of the things that's been so positive and so reassuring to me, and that has humbled me, is how many people have worked to help in our campaign. There's literally been hundreds of people helping. And the reason is because they know that our campaign is about moving Bastrop and moving Morehouse Parish forward. It's about making our town, our community, the best that it can possibly be. It's about being fair, independent. It's about laying out a plan of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. It's about showing that there's a record of accomplishment and record of achievement, that we have shown time and time again that we can do things. And it's about bringing people together. It's not about where you're born or not. It's about if you live here and you're a part of our community, you're important. And that's one of the things that we've tried to emphasize, is that this community, to move forward, is going to take the contributions of everyone. And city court is a component part of that. But we need you to volunteer, to help in every way that you can to make Bastrop and Morehouse the best place that it can possibly be. The last thing I want to do is tell my wife, Gina, who's just been great. She has worked so hard because she loves this town. She brought me here. She introduced me here, and for that I'm grateful. My kids love this town. They love to participate in extracurricular activities over at East Madison, baseball, football, and things of that sort. And I want to just ask you to please remember this Saturday, October 4th, to vote for number 68, Ross Downs, for Bastrop City Judge, to move our community forward. Thank you.
Let's give both the candidates a round of applause. Just a couple of reminders, as they both mentioned, the election is this coming Saturday. The polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. In case people don't remember where they're to vote, they need to call the registrar of voters office. This is an important election. All elections are important, but locally, the impact of this election will be felt for the next 6 years or more. And each of us will be impacted by what happens in this election one way or the other. It is very important that we each individually vote, and we encourage those folks that we know or associate with to do so as well. We thank this audience for being here today. You've been wonderful, very respectful, and I think they've done an excellent job. My closing comment is we can't go wrong with either one of these gentlemen. They're extremely competent, and I think that you can tell from the comments that they've made tonight, the questions that they've answered, that they have the welfare of this community at heart. So ponder diligently and think well of them, and we appreciate you again for offering yourselves to serve in this capacity. God bless you in your efforts. God bless the city of Bastrop, and God bless America. Thank you and good night.